Welcome to Echo Tales, where whispers of the past often carry the loudest truths. Let me lead you to the precise second the world beneath my feet cracked open. My wife, Clara, was slicing cantaloupe. That's it. That's how it truly began. After nearly 4 decades of shared life, the truth arrived, not with the explosive fanfare of fireworks, nor with the wrenching sound of tears or screams, but with the quiet, rhythmic scrape of a kitchen knife against the cutting board. The morning draped itself in ordinary light, the sky an indifferent gray. Our old dog, bless his heart, still hadn't mastered the art of ignoring squirrels. And there I was, Marcus, standing in the doorway in my socks, a yawn catching in my throat, half listening to the radio's drone. Then, from the mundane fabric of our morning, a single thread pulled loose, unraveling everything. She said, "I cheated on you years ago. You don't need to say anything. I want to unburden myself before the final curtain." No tremor in her voice, no hint of the seismic shift she'd just unleashed. Just a stark, unadorned fact, tossed into the air like a pebble, yet carrying the crushing weight of a collapsing bridge. And then she went back to slicing cantaloupe. At first, I thought it was one of her jokes. Clara had that kind of dry wit, a humor that had curdled with age. But when her gaze met mine, there was no jest, only an unsettling clarity. I managed one word, when. She didn't blink. When we lived in the blue house, with the rambling rose bushes. That was 30 years ago. 30 years. I felt my hands grow clammy. A choked, pathetic laugh escaped me, a strange, rasping sound that caught in my throat. I asked, was it just once? She simply shook her head. She shook her head. That's when I sank onto the kitchen chair, the linoleum floor a sudden, bewildering tapestry of patterns. The very walls seemed to recede, revealing a stage set I'd unknowingly inhabited for decades, directed by someone else's script. Clara wiped her hands on a dish towel and calmly placed the cantaloupe slices into a glass container, with a horrifying domesticity, as if she hadn't just reached into my chest and torn out a vital organ, exposing its raw, pulsating past to the harsh light. She said his name was Julian. She'd met him at a writing workshop she'd been attending on Saturday mornings. The same workshop I had, with innocent enthusiasm, urged her to attend because she needed more hobbies. He was single, charming, and younger. She spoke of feeling seen, again, a raw admission that pierced me. And then she added, "I stopped it before it could fully consume us, but it still happened. And I still lied." She said it had been eating her alive. The irony was a bitter taste in my mouth, for now, it was devouring me. 30 years, and I had no clue. We built a whole life together, raised Sophie and Ethan, lost jobs, buried parents, celebrated countless anniversaries. And all that time, she carried a secret I couldn't fathom. Now, at 64, I'm left to wonder, what else do I not know? She asked if I hated her. I didn't answer, because the truth was, I didn't even know who I was hating. Who was this woman I was supposed to hate? The one beside me, or the ghost of the one she had been? That night, I couldn't eat. Not dinner, not a snack, not even a sip of water. I sat in my recliner with the TV droning, but I couldn't recall a single image or sound. Clara came in twice, once to ask if I was coming to bed. I didn't answer. The second time, she placed a folded blanket on the armrest, a silent offering, and whispered, "I'm so deeply sorry, Marcus." Then she walked upstairs. I don't know why that whisper, a soft caress on the wounded air, stung more than the confession itself. Perhaps it hinted at an expectation of swift forgiveness, as if the chasm between us was merely a slight bruise, easily healed. I tried to convince myself it was ancient history, that people grow and change and stumble, that she ultimately chose me. But each time I neared the precipice of acceptance, a new thought, like a phantom fist, landed a gut punch. I had never had the chance to react when it truly mattered. I had never known the betrayal in real time. I had never had a choice in navigating this new, brutal landscape. And somehow, knowing that made it feel infinitely worse. At around 3 a.m., I opened our wedding album. I don't know why. Perhaps I wanted to anchor myself in a version of our life that still felt solid, unblemished. But as I stared at the frozen smiles, Clara's radiant, my hand clasped around hers, as if she were my entire world. All I saw now were fissures, forced grins, a future I had blundered into, blindfolded and blissfully ignorant. I looked closer. There, in a corner of a group shot, stood Julian. Not in the front row, no, but close enough to be a ghost in our joy. He had signed our guest book, too. Wishing you a life full of joy. I wanted to rip the page out. In the morning, I watched Clara move around the kitchen like nothing had happened, pouring cereal, humming lightly, her robe tied loosely at the waist. She noticed me standing in the doorway and said, "I didn't sleep much. I figured you didn't either." No hint of remorse softened her tone, only facts, as if we were merely domestic roommates, easing back into a fractured routine. I finally spoke. "Why didn't you tell me when it happened?" Her answer was instant. "Because I didn't want to lose the life we were building." It landed like a physical blow. "So," I asked, "you chose to keep me in a meticulously constructed lie, all to safeguard your own comfort." I asked her, "Did you love him?" Her silence was a vast, echoing canyon, stretching out between us. She didn't need to hear me. She simply took her time, carefully assembling my destruction. "I thought I might, back then," she finally whispered, but it faded. It wasn't real. Not real. I walked out of the room before I said something I couldn't take back. I went to the garage, sat in the car, and turned on the engine. Not to drive, just to sit in silence. That's when I saw it, tucked away in the old glove box. A photo I hadn't looked at in years. The four of us, Clara, me, and the kids, Sophie and Ethan, at Silver Lake. She had her arm around me in that picture. And now I have to wonder, was it wrapped around him in her head? But the true horror wasn't the betrayal. It was the chilling, maddening composure Clara carried, like a perfectly pressed handkerchief, tucked neatly into her pocket. She had confessed, and now she was simply done with it, like someone crossing an item off a to-do list. I was the one left behind, emotionally barefoot in a room full of broken glass. And she had the audacity to act as if the healing had already begun. That afternoon, I stayed out of the house. I drove nowhere in particular, to circle neighborhoods I didn't belong to, parked outside unfamiliar strip malls, stared at people who had no idea I was unraveling inside my 2009 Buick. I ended up behind the old middle school our kids once went to. The playground was empty. The same yellow slide was still there, the one Sophie fell off when she was 8. The same day Clara took her for ice cream while I waited in the ER. Funny, I used to think that day showed how well we worked as a team. Now, I wondered if it had just been convenience, a performance. I call my brother, Felix. He's younger, lives 2 states over, and works too much. We aren't close, but I needed to say the words out loud. I told him Clara had confessed something immense, that she cheated decades ago with someone I once considered a friend. There was a long pause. Then he asked, "Is she cheating now?" I said no. He sighed. Then, "What do you want to do?" I didn't know. I hated that I didn't know. I'm 64, Felix. I don't start over. I don't crash on couches. I don't swipe on apps. I clip coupons and overwater houseplants and rewatch the same 6 documentaries on the History Channel. This was supposed to be the stage of life where things settled. But now, I felt like I was free-falling through a past I didn't authorize. When I got home, she was in the garden, kneeling in the dirt, pulling weeds like nothing ever happened, like the marriage wasn't cracked wide open. I stood at the back door and just watched her. She looked peaceful. Her hands were dirty, her brow furrowed with focus, her lips softly moving like she was talking to the plants. When she finally noticed me, she waved me over, and I, like an idiot, walked out there. She said, "I want you to ask me anything. I'll tell you the truth this time." That phrase hit me like a physical punch, because it meant everything else had been a lie. She said I could ask her anything. So I did. I didn't even think. I just blurted out. Was there ever someone else besides him? There was no hesitation. She didn't need to search for the answer. Her mouth twitched like it had been waiting for the question. Then she nodded, just once. There was a second man. That was when the numbness finally broke. My jaw clenched so hard I thought I heard my teeth grind. I asked her who. She said she didn't want to give me his name, that it wouldn't matter anymore. "It matters to me," I said, almost shouting. She looked up at me from the dirt like I was the one being unreasonable. "You don't know him. It was in Vermont during that writing retreat I went on the year after your dad died. Vermont writing retreat. I remembered it. I stayed home grieving, drinking too much, and pretending I was fine. Clara said she needed creative space to clear her head. She was gone for 10 days. I, the grieving husband, had packed her bags, kissed her goodbye in our driveway, and told her I hoped she'd find inspiration in the mountains. She found it in another man's arms. I don't remember what I said. I think I just turned around and walked back into the house. My ears were ringing again. This time it wasn't from shock. It was rage. Quiet, simmering rage that scared me. I don't get angry easily. I grew up swallowing it, but something inside me was clawing at the edges of my throat. I went to the upstairs closet and pulled out the old photo albums. Not because I wanted to relive anything, but because I had to look at them now through this new, fractured lens. I found pictures from the Vermont trip. She was smiling in every one, relaxed, radiant, like someone on the edge of falling in love. She had that look at her eyes, that faraway gleam I used to think meant she was writing poetry in her head. Turns out, she was probably rehearsing lies. Later that night, she came upstairs and knocked softly on the bedroom door. I didn't answer. I couldn't. Not because I was just angry, but because I genuinely didn't know who she was anymore. I didn't want her voice contaminating the silence. She whispered through the door, "I told you because I respect you." I almost laughed out loud. Respect. She called 37 years of deception respect. And yet, I still couldn't bring myself to tell her to leave. The next morning, I stared at my own reflection for what felt like hours. Not out of vanity. Believe me, there's nothing flattering left about a 64-year-old man whose world just collapsed. But because I was looking for signs, clues, weakness, maybe something in my face that screamed, of course she cheated. But all I saw was an exhausted man with too many lines on his forehead and a toothbrush that suddenly felt like it didn't belong to him. I skipped breakfast. Clara didn't ask why. She just sipped her tea and read her book like we were a normal couple easing into retirement. I couldn't take it. I walked into the garage and opened every box we hadn't touched in years. Boxes from when the kids moved out, for when we renovated the basement. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. I think I just needed to feel like I was in control of something. That's when I found the binder. It was tucked beneath old tax returns and yellowed wrapping paper. A black zippered binder with a red tab. I recognized it instantly. It was from the year she started journaling again. She used to say writing helped her process emotions. I never once read her journals. I thought it would be disrespectful. Now, though, respect felt like a currency I couldn't afford to give. I opened it. The first few entries were harmless, mundane. Grocery list disguised as inner monologue. Then slowly it shifted. I recognized the date. February 12th, our anniversary. The entry began. He brought me roses again. He always means well, but I feel like I'm disappearing. I kept reading. Each page chipped away at me. Her words were soft, but brutal. He kisses me like it's routine. I miss being wanted. Another page. Julian looks at me like I'm still bright, like I matter. She wrote about their encounters. Not graphically. Clara wasn't that kind of writer, but emotionally, deeply. She described the sound of his voice, how he made her laugh mid-sentence, how she felt alive again. That word repeated itself. Alive, alive, alive. Was I dead to her all those years? And then one entry made my chest seize. If Marcus ever found out, I wonder if he'd even fight for me. I closed the binder. My hands were shaking, not from betrayal this time, but from recognition. Because she was right. I never fought for her. Not really. I just existed beside her, like wallpaper. And now I wasn't sure who I hated more, her or myself. 2 days after finding the journal, I decided to go to the attic. Not for anything in particular, but because it was the last part of the house that still felt untouched. Like maybe the truth hadn't reached it yet. There's something strange about climbing a creaky wooden ladder into a dusty space filled with forgotten holiday decorations and baby clothes. It feels like stepping into a graveyard of who you used to be. I found a box labeled Marcus College stuff. I hadn't seen it in years. Inside were old notebooks, some Polaroids, and a bundle of cards tied with twine. Most of them were from Clara. I untied the strings slowly. One of the cards was dated a few months before we got engaged. It said, "I think I'm almost ready to leave the past behind. Maybe this is the right forever after all." At the time, I thought she meant an old breakup. Now, I'm not so sure. But that's not what broke me. What broke me was the envelope hidden behind the cards. A small one, yellowed with age, sealed and unmarked. I opened it and pulled out a photo, a sonogram. My chest locked up. We had 2 kids, Sophie and Ethan, both planned, both cherished. This one wasn't either of them. I stared at the image, trying to decipher the date in the corner. It was from the second year of our marriage, long before we even talked seriously about starting a family. I flipped the photo over. In Clara's handwriting, it said, "I'm sorry I couldn't keep this secret in the baby too." I sat there in the attic, unable to move, breathing in dust and betrayal. She hadn't just cheated. She'd been pregnant, and she never told me. Was it his? Did she end it because of the pregnancy? Did she get rid of it without telling me? Or did something happen? Miscarriage? I didn't know. I still don't. Later that night, I stood in the doorway of the bedroom and asked her straight out, "Did you get pregnant by him?" She froze. Her face didn't fall. It calcified, like she prepared for that moment, but prayed it would never come. She didn't deny it. Instead, she said, "I thought I could carry it and make you believe it was yours. But I lost it, and I was relieved. I hated myself for that. I still do." The room spun, not just from anger, but from the sheer weight of decades of falsehoods. My entire concept of love, trust, fatherhood, it all blurred into something murky and unrecognizable. She asked if I wanted her to leave. I didn't answer, because what do you say to a woman who buried this much under your marriage and then handed you the shovel? I didn't sleep that night, not even for a minute. I just sat on the edge of the bed like a ghost in his own house, listening to Clara breathe softly beside me, as if nothing had changed. But everything had. The woman I built my life around had quietly destroyed the foundation of it while I was busy believing we were solid. At sunrise, I packed a small bag. I wasn't leaving permanently. At least, I didn't think I was. I just needed to breathe somewhere that didn't reek of betrayal. I drove to the lake house, my late parents' cabin, 2 hours away. I hadn't been there in years, but I still had a spare key under the wooden owl on the porch. The moment I stepped inside, I felt like I could finally exhale. It was musty, cold, unloved, but honest. I made coffee on the old gas stove and sat at the table staring out at the water. I kept wondering how long had I been a background character in my own marriage? Was I just comfortable for her, a safe option while she lived a secret life in the margins? That afternoon, my daughter Sophie called. She'd heard from Clara that I needed space. I tried to sound normal, but I guess I failed because her voice went sharp. "Dad, what's going on?" I told her I couldn't explain yet, that I would, just not now. She was quiet for a long beat, then said something I'll never forget. "You know, Mom was always really good at hiding when she was hurting. I wonder if she got just as good at hiding other things, too." That sentence haunted me, because Sophie had no idea what had happened, and yet she knew something had always been off. I stayed at the cabin for 3 days. Clara only texted once. "I'm here when you're ready to talk. I don't want to lose you, even if I deserve to." I didn't reply, not because I was punishing her, but because I genuinely didn't know if there was anything left to salvage. I kept thinking about the life we had built, the family dinners, the Christmas mornings, the inside jokes. How many of those moments were real? How many were staged? On the third night, I woke up in a cold sweat from a dream where I was walking through our house, but every room was empty, just drywall and nails, nothing on the walls, no furniture, no signs of life. When I reached the bedroom in the dream, Clara was sitting on the floor, smiling, and then she said, "You build all of this for us, Marcus. I just never asked you to." I came home on the 4th day, not because I had all the answers, or because some dramatic revelation changed everything, but because the silence stopped feeling like strength and started feeling like fear. Fear of being alone, fear of letting anger turn into bitterness, fear that I'd spend the rest of my life measuring everything against a past I could never change. When I walked through the front door, Clara was in the living room, sitting on the couch with her hands in her lap. No music playing, no TV on, just her waiting. I sat down across from her. For a long time, we didn't speak. And then I asked her the one question I'd been avoiding. "Why didn't you leave me back then?" Her eyes filled with tears, because even in the middle of all my mess, you were still the only person who saw me as worth saving. And I didn't want to give that up. That should have made me angrier, but it didn't. It just broke something open in me. I wasn't ready to forgive her. Not completely. But I was tired of carrying the weight of betrayal without asking myself why I'd been so blind for so long. We talked for hours about everything. Not just the affairs, but the emptiness, the lost years, the times we both drifted and didn't say a word. There were tears, some raised voices, some laughter that surprised us both. And somewhere in that mess, we found a thread, a thin, fragile thread of something that still felt like love. Not the fairy tale kind, not the flawless storybook version, but the kind that survives wreckage. The kind you rebuild slowly with scarred hands and hesitant hope. It's been 3 months since that night. We're in counseling now. We go for walks more often. We hold hands again, not out of habit, but because it still matters. There are moments when I look at her and feel the sting, but there are more moments now when I look at her and feel peace. She told me the truth. I stood there like a fool, but I stayed, and somehow that's where the healing began. Thank you for listening to Echo Tales. We hope this story of unraveling and rebuilding resonates with you. Remember to subscribe for more narratives that dive deep into the human heart and explore the echoes of our past. Until next time, keep listening to the stories that shape us.